congratulations on the 9,000 Substack subscribers. It'll probably be about 10,000 by the time this comes out. But did you think you'd expect that much traction in such short time of starting your Substack?
Honestly, not at all. That was probably like the biggest surprise of the year because I only started this year in October. So it's December now.
Yeah.
And only posted 4 articles so far. But I think the surprising thing about that, because a lot of people in my DMs on Substack are like, how did you do this? Like some people even a little bit like annoyed, like,
Yeah.
what was
Yeah.
your trick? What was your secret? And I honestly think the YouTube that I started earlier this year was the reason for that like spike in
Yeah.
growth because I had been practicing telling my story, digging into my story, and then scripting it for YouTube videos. And when I started a Substack, I was like, well, the easiest, quickest way to start and just get something out there would be to repurpose those blogs and make them into more readable articles. And so, within a month, posted like 4 of them. And then I just saw the spike and it was like, what is going on here? So even though it seems like it's only been a couple months, it's
Mm.
been since more like the beginning of the year that I've been working
Mm.
on those pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really smart that you've repurposed your YouTube stuff. It definitely saves a lot of time, but also if it works on YouTube, it's probably going to work in written form on Substack. But why do you think people resonate with what you're writing and posting so much?
Yeah. I think I almost got a bit sick of hiding the side of myself that was very vulnerable and honest and like a little bit mushy, a little bit into like the philosophical quotes. And so I kind of just like, I did it as a way of actually getting a bit of my like creative outlets out there. I didn't expect for people to react to it in that way, but I think it's probably because it is a little bit more honest and a little bit more vulnerable. And, a lot of the time I try and when you start editing your own writing, you think like, is it too much about me? Like, is it too much
Mm.
of the I? Like, you always start feeling like a bit narcissistic when you dig into your own story and second guess, are people even going to relate to this? And I think that's often like with my work, at least what I've seen, is the more uncomfortable I feel about actually putting it out there and the more cringy it feels, somehow that tends to perform better. Maybe it's also a bit of like in the world, especially us Gen Z kids out here, we like so used to the over filtered,
Mm.
so polished. And so I guess even with writing those, I mean, there were at least 24 drafts for each. So I'm not going to say
Wow.
that it was completely like unfiltered because it
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't filtered, but it was trying to get to like the core of how I really felt. And
Mm.
so I think that's maybe why, but yeah, still early in this game. So
Mm.
that would
Yeah,
just be my guess.
and how did Emma Watson help you with that, sharing your like
Yeah,
story and stuff? You mentioned a quote that
yeah.
on a podcast that she had.
For sure. I think it actually, Emma Watson almost confirmed what I already
Oh.
started doing. And that confirmation like catapulted me forward because obviously she's so inspirational. And out of anyone in Hollywood, I think she would be the person that I relate to the most. And you don't often see her in interviews where she's really like being open. And so that podcast that I watched was with her on Jay Shetty's podcast. And her main story was all about telling your story and how actually people need to hear it. So I think I'll paraphrase it, but she said something on the lines of a lot of the thoughts that we have, they obviously live in our heads. So all of our thoughts and our feelings live in our heads. And it's not a great place for them to live because
Mm.
it's not tangible and it's not something that you can work with. And I think this is what I've found with journaling that's been so great is like you're putting it down and you can start to see a bit of a golden thread running through, each journal entry or each YouTube video or each Substack article. And so I think I just really loved what she said because she's such a empathetic, almost like apologetic human. But at the same time, she's so passionate about telling her story. And she also talked about how like she would second guess, I don't have anything worth saying. this is so being full of myself. But actually, when she started revealing herself to others, and the way she did it, so interestingly, because I don't know if you know this about Emma Watson, but she actually took a step back from Hollywood and decided to go study creative writing, which I thought was so cool. And so during that time, she was living with like a couple people, her roommates, and she decided for her final piece that she would write an actual like theater show based on her life in terms of leaving Hollywood and trying to live a normal life again. And when she performed it for her friends and family, because that's the other key thing is it doesn't have to be in public on YouTube. It can be just for your closest friends and family when it comes to sharing your story. And the reaction she got was so unexpected. She thought she was this vulnerable person where she was being honest to her friends and family about her likes and her dislikes and her needs and her fears. And when she performed this, the response was like, wait, is that what you really are going through? Like, is that seriously how you've been feeling all along? And so I guess from that podcast, she kind of summed up, we underestimate how much people know about us. And so we feel a little bit like, I mean, everyone wants to belong, right? Everyone wants to find their tribe. Everyone wants to feel accepted for who they are. And I guess one of the best ways to do that would actually be to put yourself out there for who you really are and the real feelings instead of, trying to paint this perception of who you are. And that will be a quick way to actually attract those people into your life. It's like a good litmus test because those who won't relate, will move past. And those who do will be like, that really hit me. So yeah, I think that's what her whole message from that podcast was. And I just related to it so heavily. And I was like, this is such great motivation for me to keep doing this.
Yeah, no, it's really, really powerful. And it's
Mhm.
interesting that she thought she was being narcissistic or had loads of self-doubt about it. Why do you think we have that self-doubt when it comes to being vulnerable and
Yeah.
open and sharing our stories on the internet, even though we've been proven time and time again through the creators that we watch or read or just adore that when you do that, you do end up getting that loyal audience that you're talking about. Why do we still doubt ourselves and stop ourselves from doing it for so long?
Yeah. I think there's probably so many reasons. The first thing that came to mind was like, especially in your 20s, if you think about being in your teen years, if you had to be that person to get really deep and vulnerable and really share something, often it would be the first thing to be picked at, it would be the first thing to kind of tear down and make fun of because you're revealing something of yourself. And so I think I would say part of that, at least for me, is shedding that skin and being like, it's actually safe to do that. And reminding yourself that like rejection really is, it sounds so cringy, but rejection really is redirection. So when someone rejects that, if you understand what like shadow work is, when, people project their fears onto you, and like it's the same thing for you when you're cringing at something, it's because it resonated with you somehow, or
Mm.
you imagined yourself in that position. So I think it's a lot about insecurity and like shedding that insecurity and letting go of having to be perfect. Because I think that's another thing is like you're putting yourself out there to be. I mean, when I hit record and I have to talk to camera for my vlogs, it's like the most excruciatingly awkward thing knowing that someone else will be. I'm sure you've experienced this too. It's almost like you don't want anyone to find your Substack or to find
Yeah.
your YouTube. You're like, I just want changes because then I can just be myself and be rid of all the past perceptions that are like still, dragging onto you behind of like, this was me in high school, this was me in university, this is me in my job. And I think it's like, it's a beautiful way of actually just embracing yourself when you do put yourself out there because you're like, well, it's out there, it's out in the open now. And if someone does discover it, then they'll either be cringing and that's cool, or they'll be like, and then you actually get like the response that I've had from people who are, almost these loose ties and these loose connections from varsity, a lot of them being other women saying like, thank you so much for being honest about how you're feeling in your 20s because from the outside, your LinkedIn looked great, your Instagram looked great, but actually you're you're struggling with the exact same things that, mm, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, no, I literally, when I first started my Instagram account for like wildlife photography when I was 15, I blocked
Yeah.
everyone in my school. And
Oh
I
my.
only told my dad and like maybe my sister because I was so petrified because I knew at that point in my life, especially at 15, that if I
Mm,
did not block everyone, if someone found out and said it, like mentioned it at school, then I'd probably like stop doing it. And I really didn't
yeah.
want to. It was a defense mechanism. And
Yes.
you've mentioned that you are quite romantic and you drew a picture of your crush and showed it to him and then he ghosted you and then and then that kind of put you off being a romantic and you suppress that part of yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that runs parallel with when I was reading that with the fact that I love nature and bird watching and I suppressed
Mm,
that romantic side of me, my love for nature throughout my
mm,
teenhood as well. How did
mm,
you get out of that suppression of your romantic side, and how long did it
yeah.
take for you to do that?
Yeah. I honestly, like, if anyone who is listening relates to that and they're suppressing something that they really love, I think all it was time. Like, I think there's almost a rite of passage when it comes to going through your teenage years. Like, it was so normal for you to want to block everyone and so that you could get started. I mean, like, everything's so much more of a big deal when you're a teen. And I think, there's so much attached to, even in university, there's so much more status and popularity, and like there's these clear like divides. And you move into the real world and you move into the working world, and you might befriend someone who's 10 years older than you, and you might like your world kind of splits up. And I think as you grow, you kind of stop caring as much. So I do think it's honestly just a rite of passage. I don't think there's any rush to get rid of it. But I think it is important to also know like the common pattern of how people do eventually come back to themselves. Like there's this idea of coming back to your childhood self. And so with your question about being a romantic, I'd have to think about that because I I was always a romantic, and like you said, drew a picture of my crush, sent it to him at the time. I think I was in grade 9, which is about like 15 for anyone who doesn't know how the grade system works in South Africa. But yeah, he ghosted me after that. And that was like my realization, like, okay, I've got to build this wall up and I've got to be like non-romantic and I've got to, be the cool girl who's all mysterious. And I tried that and it also didn't work. So like that's also a good learning experience. And then meeting like my first love was an amazing thing because he brought me back out of my shell. Like we went on our first date, and the first thing he said to me, he was like, okay, tell me your most embarrassing story. And I told him my most embarrassing story. And then we swapped stories. And he's like, okay. And then he would like get into the next question. I was just frothing for this. I was like, I didn't know that boys my age, this is now I'm 18 at the time. I didn't know boys my age could be so like passionate and want to really get to know each other. And like, then he started like introducing me to old music and Motown and Nina Simone. And I was like, this is like an old soul. He's exactly like me. And so sometimes it is just a person. It's like that one
Mm.
person to remind you that actually, like, you're not, there's like, I think Mark Manson maybe speaks about this, like, you're not actually so unique in your problems and you should find some comfort in that. And like, as much as that can maybe be like an ouchie because it's like, what do you mean I'm not unique? Like, my problems matter. It is a bit comforting because it's like, there are people exactly like you out there, and it's just that matter of time until you find them.
Mm. Yeah, time carries most of the weight, and it's so interesting how you said in like secondary school or high school and at
Mhm.
university there's this weird social hierarchy which doesn't exist maybe as much in adulthood. And I
Mhm.
find it so interesting because since I've been at university, maybe slightly before that, I kind of removed myself from that because obviously we all go through that phase of really trying to fit in at some
Yeah.
point in our lives. And for me, that was when I was like 14 or 15. And then I think it was when it was COVID, because we got kicked out of school, basically, you were just left to your own devices. And that's when I
Yes.
stepped away from that and realized, oh, wait, I don't want to hang out with these people. I
That's
want to
so
get back
interesting.
into nature. What was it like for you back then? How old were
Yeah.
you when it was lockdown?
So in lockdown, I would have been 19 going on 20, and I was in my second year. And to be honest, I didn't really experience that, like in a similar way on what you're talking about in terms of stepping back and kind of getting back into contact with your own inner voice and what do I like and who do I want to hang out with.
Yeah.
My only way of like experiencing that is every time I delete social media off my phone. Like
Mm,
when I've deleted social media, I can actually like hear my own thoughts again and I can hear
yeah.
my inner voice come back to myself. But I can imagine that at school, because I think varsity, you're already quite independent
Oh,
and,
yeah.
you'll go to like 3 lectures a day and then spend the rest of the day, like when you've got a car and you can get around. But at school, you're kind of stuck with those same people. So I think I can totally get why like taking a step away from that could have been like, who do I want? Because almost a blessing in disguise that you had that in school. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I still feel like there's people my age in university that are still playing that status
Yeah.
game and that hierarchy. And I just think like it's not high school anymore. It's not like grade
Yeah.
10. Like why are you still doing this? Like it's almost like a small town hero. Like then people that you thought was so intimidating and cool, like when you were younger, when you were a teenager, actually end up peaking at that age because they just
Yes.
care so much about what people think about them and they just stay
Yeah.
in that and never show their true
Yeah.
colors. But how do people find, say they want to go off social media like you just kind of recommended in a way, and I totally agree with that, and they don't have that first boyfriend or first girlfriend or best friend
Mhm.
that thinks similarly to them, how do you find someone who can help you become your true
Mhm.
self? Or if you find no one and you have to do it yourself, what would you recommend instead for that person who are
Mhm.
trying to reconnect with their inner voice?
Yeah. I think honestly, okay, there's so many ways because this is kind of what I wrote on Substack about taste and kind of finding those little nudges that get you towards what do you actually like and trusting your inner voice and your inner knowing. I would say to someone who feels like a bit alone and doesn't have that person and they really need that right now. I mean, firstly, you can look to books. There's
Mm.
so much. Something that I recently did is swapped from self-help books, which I was reading like all the time for probably the past 5 years. And a lot of that had to do with, my dad telling me, you got to read this genre. It's amazing. And I really look up to him. So I did that. But getting back to the romantic side of me, reading fiction has been like starting to read that again this year. I think that's honestly opened up something in me. And I'm like, I never actually chose myself to read self help. And it's helped me in a lot of ways. But I think you get to a wall where you need to also just like learn from experience and not just from
Yeah.
reading a list in a book. So I guess the lesson out of that would be like what brings you joy and how can you follow that? And I also don't want to paint social media to be such a bad thing. I'm not off it as in deactivated all my accounts. I just don't have it on my phone so I can't scroll in bed. But I'm definitely very much into YouTube and podcasts. So I think being very intentional about curating who you listen to, when you listen to it, how you listen to that. Like, are you just passively scrolling and literally watching your life go by? Or are you deciding, I'm going to spring clean? I'm going to throw on, this amazing entrepreneur who's going to talk about his ideas, or I'm going to listen to whatever your genre is, whatever interests you. I think you can start there.
Definitely. I love how you say entrepreneur. That's such a cool way
Yeah.
of saying it. But yeah, no, I 100% agree.
Mhm.
Podcasting, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago when I first moved to university, that's
Mhm.
definitely almost was like a pivotal moment in my life, really. I started going to
Mhm.
the gym. Then I started listening to self-improvement podcasts. Then I started
Mhm.
reading those self-help books like your dad recommended to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
after doing that, it really did change a lot of things, but I do 100% agree with the experience thing as well. So how can we, maybe after you've read the self-help books and you've got the
Mhm.
podcast listening into your routine, how do
Mhm.
we then learn by experiencing? Because I think a lot of people kind of just locked up in their rooms and
Yeah.
are just I guess, either being super antisocial or being maybe too sociable, playing video games or being online or just not experiencing the real world enough. How can we experience the real world? Because that post that you did on traveling was quite a good
Yeah.
um, piece of wisdom for this, I'd say.
Yeah, that I think a lot of cynicism that I've observed in older people has come from them not going after the things they really wanted. And I think that might be at the moment my biggest fear. I'm 25. I'm like, everyone's paths have split. It's like this one is getting engaged. This one just took a gap year and quit their job and they're traveling. This one put a down payment on a house. And like, I'm living at home. I'm working at the same place I was 3 years ago. And like, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for that time. But going back to what you were saying, I'm sure you can cut this out. Just remind me what you were saying, what your question
I
was.
was saying, like, how can we experience and learn from that? Because I think a lot of people
Yes,
don't
actually.
experience life enough.
Yes, I remember your question. I think one of the best things to do, again, this is going to sound cliche, is to go after the things that scare you. Because again, if you look into your shadow and the things that make you cringe or the things that you're fearful of are often little clues into where you can maybe take a little bit of direction in your life. And so I think, I haven't figured it all out. And I even went through a large phase of social anxiety. And none of my friends even knew it. It was like definitely all in my head. But I think it's almost like exposure therapy. I think there's only so many self help books you can read and podcasts you can listen to. And then you have to start going after the things that actually scare you. So, something, I'll use an example. I loved doing speeches and drama and reciting poems for the class. And then got to like my late teens and something fell off like the wagon. I don't know what it was. I think it was again coming of age, natural thing that happens when you're hormonal and like figuring it all out. But I developed like a deep fear of being in the spotlight. And so I would literally go to the extent of like looking in the room and trying to see which was the darkest space in the room and sitting there, whether it was at a dinner table with family, like that's to the point it got to, like, whereas I started as the kid who would raise their hand first. Now I was like, oh my God, don't pick me, don't pick me. So I think the best thing for that, obviously it reached a point of like rock bottom where I was like, I can't keep doing this. And I know this isn't me. And I think the best thing was leaning into the fear. So I joined a Toastmasters, which was terrifying to begin with. And for those who don't know what Toastmasters is, it's like this global club where you can practice public speaking. And a lot of the time it's amazing because there's like, when I had my club, there was one woman who was like 60 and another person who had a stutter and someone else who wasn't getting promoted and they deserved it and they didn't know how to get there. And so it's like a safe space to start practicing. So like whatever your fear is, what is your safe space to start practicing that thing? Because there always is a space for that. And I think, yeah, the exposure therapy helped. And then I started jumping up opportunities that I wasn't ready for, including this podcast, which is my first podcast. So, like I was chatting to a friend about it when you had asked me, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready to do a podcast. I don't think I'm of age. I don't think I deserve to be on a podcast. And I knew eventually in the back of my head, because I'd proven this to myself time and time before in the last like 3-4 years, that's normal. And you're not going to learn. Because then I thought about, but I want to be on a podcast when I'm 40. So when am I going to start? Maybe I should just start. And I think that's where you start surprising yourself and you start gaining a little bit of confidence through that. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just those limiting beliefs that we stop ourselves, which stops us from taking action, even though we want to do that action eventually. It's like, even with this podcast, it took me at least a year to start
Yeah.
it because I had all these limiting beliefs like, oh, I'm too young, like I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough
Yeah.
social proof, I'm not like a 50-year-old like
Yeah.
billionaire who's like written 10 best-selling books like most podcast hosts are. But you
Yeah.
realize like a lot of these people that we both look up to that have written the books or have started the podcasts started as nobodies, and
Mm.
the one
Literally.
thing that they did to get to where they are now is they started. So
Yeah.
I could not recommend more the advice that you're giving, which is just to
Mhm.
take action despite the
Mhm.
fear, because once you're 5 minutes into the public speaking or 5 minutes into the podcast or writing the Substack post, it
Mhm.
becomes less tense. And the more you do it, the more you realize you can do, and the easier it gets
Yeah.
because it becomes like a routine, right?
Sure. It's like it's the same thing you see on Substack where people are like, I don't know what to write about. And I also really don't like the advice of choosing a niche because if you just start and you just put pen on paper and you start from a place that's true and you're writing about things you really love and you care about. I mean, a lot of my articles are something I've just been interested in. And then I did like a deep dive of research. And so it's like, it's both a becoming thing because I'm learning about myself, but then it's also understanding a bit of research. And then you put it out there. And by the time you've got 10 things out there, you can start seeing the pattern. And so your niche almost like finds you. Another thing on bravery, have you watched it's such a weird like segue, but have you watched the movie Coraline?
Yeah. Quite a while
Okay.
ago, quite a few times when I was like
Yeah.
5.
So a lot of people hate it because it is quite scary, especially that
It's
it
weird,
fits
yeah.
in it. But for some reason, I was like obsessed with that. Like I remember going to the movies with other 11-year-old girls my age, and they all ran out like crying with their moms. And I was like, no, I'm obsessed and I'm watching this till the end. And I revisited it recently. I also had I got a subscription to Masterclass to learn about like just hobbies after work. And one of them was creative writing. I've just forgotten the author's name, but he basically talked about what inspired that story. And he was out in the park with his child, and there was a bunch of wasps that had broke into a swarm. And he had to like carry this child out of the swarm and get away, and he was stung multiple times. I think he actually asked his child to run ahead and fought, like sacrificed himself being stung
Wow.
multiple times, right? So he says this wasn't the story though. He dropped his glasses and he wanted to go fetch them the next day. And he realized like the bravery wasn't, telling his kid to run ahead or whatever. It was revisiting that exact same spot where he knew the
Mm,
wasps were going to be, being
mm.
terrified to do it, but doing it anyways. And that was literally the inspiration for Coraline, which was about, she goes in through that little door, she meets her other mother. It's terrifying. She leaves. But then when her friends all get trapped there, she's already seen how scary it all is. And she's experienced like the absolute like stress and fear of it. And she chooses to go back. So I think like that resonated with me so much because back to like the exposure therapy, when you go do something, it's not going to be perfect the first time. You're going to make yourself cringe. You're going to embarrass yourself at some point. But everyone has to be brave and do that again and do it scared.
Yeah, in Coraline, did her other parents try and like stitch her eyes up or something with like
Yes.
cotton? Yeah.
Literally. It was like
Why
think
though?
Stranger Things. Have you watched Stranger Things? The new one's
Yeah, I
just
watched the first couple of seasons, yeah.
okay. It's like the upside down. I think like Coraline inspired the original Stranger Things. That's my theory. But I don't know. Maybe the Duffer brothers also had the same idea. But basically it was like the same house that she was living in, but when she went through this little trap door, her parents were these kind of scarecrow-like parents with buttons in their eyes, and they wanted her to live with them. But to
Yeah.
live with them, she had to have buttons sewed into her eyes. A very creepy child story, but if you can look past that, it's an amazing, amazing message.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of journaling, you mentioned that earlier.
Mm,
I journaled today for the first time in too
mm,
long, which was such a relief. Like you were saying about how I think you said Emma Watson said it, where we have so much built up when we don't release what we're saying, either through
mm,
speech, through writing, through video, etc. So I did that this morning and it was really good. But in
Yeah.
terms of your journaling experience, what's one aspect about your life that reappears over multiple journal entries, a part that hasn't been
Mm,
lost yet?
mm, such a good question. Something that's reappeared. Okay, I know something that's reappeared is how serious I can make life. So I can sometimes read back on an entry and I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, you were so like taking this far too seriously. And I think what it's taught me is how to carry myself in a little bit more of a light way and not having to. I think I'm definitely a perfectionist. And so I think my biggest takeaway from therapy, which I also did a lot of journaling for, so I'd do a session and then I'd do a long journal after my session. The biggest takeaway for me, I drew like this giant yin yang on a page. And I think maybe the perfectionists will relate to this. Like, you want to make sure every decision you make is right. You want to make sure everything you say, everything, you second guess everything that comes out your mouth because you're like, is it the perfect thing to say? And my therapist just blatantly said, like, if you were only the white of that yin yang and you didn't have that little dot of madness, that little spot of something interesting, it would make you boring. And so I think, yeah, something that when I revisited all of my very old entries, especially from university days, I think I was taking things so seriously. And yeah, that lesson might not have come if I hadn't documented all of that through my 20s, early 20s. I think that would be it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say about perfectionism when you drew the yin and yang, you made sure it was directly proportional and
Crack that.
yeah, like you did 20 redrafts. Maybe that's the perfectionist
Just
in
me.
me coming out as well. And
Yeah.
in terms of therapy, what have you learned from going to therapy and when did that start for
Mm.
you?
Yeah. I think, I've been very lucky to not have any big reason to go to therapy. But when I started earning my own money, I think therapy is such a positive thing in our generation. It was like going for your doctor's checkup for me, and I think people underestimate how phenomenal it is to have, or at least I can't speak for other people. I underestimated how amazing it was to have a completely unbiased person witness what you had to say. And then much later, I can't remember who wrote this quote, but I read something on the lines of trauma isn't because of the experience that happens, it's the absence of a witness to the trauma.
Mm.
And oh my God, this is why everyone needs to go to therapy because it doesn't matter if it's a small thing. Sometimes you had a parent who, shrugged it off, and that's not a big deal. You can get over it. And for some reason, it hit you deeper than it looked like it should have on the outside. And having someone witness that and just sit with you and be like, that's not okay. Or I can see why that hurt you. And you know that they're unbiased. They don't have any ulterior motives. They don't know your life. They don't know your family. They don't know your friends. And so that was it was a mind blowing experience for me. And I keep telling to anytime a friend is like, do you think I should try? And this is the exact story that I would tell them is that in itself, don't go into it because I went into it with goals and this is what I want to get out of it. And, doing the typical self-helpy thing, just hearing yourself speak and then someone echoing that back to you and then being unbiased.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you still go?
Funny enough, I hadn't gone in a year and I had my first session today again because I wanted to revisit more things about career and relationships. And it's so funny, not going in kind of talking about past and upbringing and childhood. It's it really feels like I've closed that chapter and I'll revisit it, I'm sure, at some stage. But it's so nice to now be in a stage where I want therapy just to figure out what's going on now. And almost
Mm.
it feels more like a life coach situation than before. So it really is you start to see these stepping stones appear.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and I'm glad that's
Yeah.
happened to you. And in terms of your childhood and that closed chapter, what was there lying in the darkness that needed to be resolved and needed to be closed, which therapy
Mhm.
helped from your
Yeah.
childhood?
Number like the first word that's like bold in my head when you asked that was like shame. And that was the biggest thing that came out of therapy was like I was carrying so much shame, and shame is like the worst emotion you can feel because it's like depression and sadness is about life and something going on here. Shame is like I'm the reason, I'm the problem. And so I didn't even realize how much of that I was carrying. And I think going back into it was hard. Hey, it was hard to go back to those past cringy selves because nothing drastic happened. It was literally like normal light bullying, light things that happened in childhood and in teen years. And if you're a very sensitive soul like me, can like change the trajectory of like how you view the world. And like, I think going back to those scenarios and being very compassionate, like I used to look at photos of myself when I was 12 and I didn't even want to look at them. I was like, oh, like cringe. And that's so wrong. Like, what do you mean? She's such a cute little 11-year-old girl. So I think that was a big thing for me is going back with compassion, revisiting those stories with compassion, almost like sitting across the table with my younger self and having tea with her and being like, it's okay.
Mm.
And I think carrying that a lot of the time in therapy, I think it's a common theme. It's like you start to integrate all yourselves and they're all like one happy family and you go through life and it's okay that they're all there versus trying to like push it down and forget about it.
Yeah, definitely. And why were
Mhm.
you ashamed? Like, what were you
Mhm.
ashamed about when you were
Yeah.
that age?
Yeah. I think honestly speaking, I was such a late bloomer. I was like, I was at an all girls school. I started at a co-ed school, which was boys and girls. And I think I just had like one or two experiences that set me off where, you know, I guess like it goes back. It's quite a deep question, but I think parents were definitely involved. And, I had a dad who was very much wanted me to be the achiever. I had a mom who had a big lack of boundaries. So I was always in fear of like if she would expose something to my friends or like I never felt like my secrets were safe with family. And so it was hard. There was so like my parents were almost these polar opposites. And so having to be a child who's like got a lot of emotions and very sensitive, I guess I didn't feel like I had someone to talk to. I even remember one day and I was 15, I like begged my mom for some therapy and she also brushed it off. She was like, because I've always been an achiever. I've been great at sports. I've like, on the outside, I'm an eldest daughter. I like, I even taught my parents how to parent my younger sister some of the time, like I think I grew up too fast. I grew up too young. And I think it was almost like a reparenting of my younger self, of saying the things to her that I think someone needed to tell me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And
Mhm.
do you, do you think having that expectation on you and being
Mhm.
loved more when you performed well, do
Mhm.
you think that brought you shame, or did it just bring you shame because you feel like you couldn't meet up to this almost perfect, unrealistic standard?
Mm. I think, yeah, I've never thought about like shame with the achiever thing paired together, but you actually have a point because if it wasn't so much about achieving, but if I did something to embarrass my family or if I said the wrong thing or, I would completely have a meltdown. I'm talking ages like 13 to 16. And so definitely like overthinking everything I said, which in the end actually makes you mute. Like it makes you
Mm.
go into this paralysis. But I think in terms of being an achiever, there's a lot of blessings that have come with that as well. Like my parents have never punished me for doing badly in a test or something. They've just been, extra enthusiastic and always wanting to follow up about what I've achieved, or, it would come out in the way they would talk about me to other people. Like, Sydney did this, Sydney achieved this, and they'd feel so proud. So I'd want to keep going at that. And I think entering the working world has been really interesting because your parents kind of retract from that a little bit. They're no longer that same person in your life. And you start to kind of, I mean, for me at least, I've realized that my values are very different to that. And I don't want to keep treating my life like there's this finish line at the end of it.
Mm. So if there is no finish line, what does that look like, not having a finish line for you?
Mm.
What does your ideals and values actually look like for you, maybe compared to what you were brought up to think and feel?
Mm. Yeah, I think I would encourage anyone to get into meditation, not even in the spiritual way. And even if it's just in the form of podcasts, like I downloaded an app called Waking Up. Don't know if you've heard of
Nice,
it, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, Sam Harris is Waking Up. So, I mean, I tend to do a lot more of the listening to the podcast than I do to the actual, meditation, sit down and close your eyes and meditate. But I think all of my beliefs have been credited to that app and all the amazing minds and lecturers on there. Because, I mean, especially Alan Watts in particular, who's very famous in the Zen and Buddhism world, he talks about life being this dance. And it's like, we get programmed to think, okay, get your retirement sorted, promotion, 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 retirement, you get your retirement annuity, and then what? You're too sore to do anything.
Mm,
You're too old and grumpy to want to go backpacking and staying in hostels. I'm not saying that's like what everyone's dream is, because I know not everyone's like dying to travel, but whatever that means for you, I feel like we let this narrative of like there's this finish line, and if I just work my through my 20s and pull as many all-nighters as possible, then I'll get there. And if you listen to anyone who's achieved those things, they go, I wish I had spent more time like looking up, and I wish I had spent
mm,
more time with my family. It's like these videos you see where they interview people on their deathbeds, and like the two things are always, I wish I spent more time with my loved ones, and like I wish I didn't worry so much about money and saving, and like actually use that to do the things that I love. And so I guess it is a work in progress for me still. I'm not going to pretend like I've got it all figured out, because I definitely still have that like ambitious achiever, always looking for the greener grass. And what I'm trying to do is treat it like a dance. Like the way Alan Watts puts it is, you wouldn't dance just to get to the end of the song.
mm,
You dance and you enjoy every moment, and you're in the flow, and you're looking up and you're making eye contact with people and you're connecting. And that's been what I've been striving for at the moment, is how do I unlearn that archetype of the achiever that I know so well from childhood, from university, from high school, and like find a bit of a balance. We all want to be stable. We all want to be financially free for sure. But how do you do it in a way that's sustainable, where you don't get to the age 50 and you have all these regrets and
mm,
you become the cynic about not living your life?
yeah, it's like the age old struggle, I guess. I'm definitely the archetype you're describing in a way.
Yes.
And do you know that there are any ways to continue to strive for your goals and your
Mm.
ambitions whilst also being aware of your own 2 feet on the floor, Like,
Yes.
how can we it seems are do you think they're mutually exclusive? Because it seems like they're 2 different modes of presence or
I know.
being, and I personally find it hard to be both at the same time. I'm
Mm,
either on the
mm,
grind and not being that like grateful and gratitude and just focusing on the goal, and then I'll
mm,
switch off onto the
mm.
grateful, present, sociable part of me.
So
But do you think there's a
relatable.
way to balance it, or do you think there's different seasons, at different points of life for it?
Mm. This is actually where I was literally struggling with this exact same thing in the beginning of this year, where I was like, I'm either so desperately wanting to move to the next step and okay, I need to find a new job, or I need to book a trip and like travel, or like you're looking for that greener grass, or you are like really present and you're really enjoying something, or you've reached a milestone and you're surfing that wave and until you come down again, and then you're looking for the next thing.
Mhm.
And I think it's something I also struggle with in Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm like, what is it called? Agnostic.
Agnostic? Yeah.
Yes. But I do love a lot of what Buddhism teaches, but I also struggle with that where I'm like, but if I just sit and I'm just content with everything, will I grow? And
Mm.
so I am fond of the growth mindset, but this is where I wrote about this as well. I created a mantra for myself. I'm like considering getting a tattoo of it, but I'm also like, let's just like give it a year and let me see if I'm still going back to this. But the mantra is persevere with patience. And I
Yeah.
think that for me was the line, like, you can still persevere, but you've got to be patient that it's not all, a lot of the progress is invisible. And this is why I'm not on social media as much as I probably like would have been before coming to all these conclusions, is if you're only posting the things on LinkedIn and only posting the good things on Instagram, which we all do and it's natural, but if you're not taking the time to also sit with your thoughts, sit with the gratitude of what you've achieved, like, I think that's where you were asking, how do you juggle both? I think
Yeah.
the answer to that for me in my life is ritual. So, like, at the end of every single year, I do the same reflection exercise and I do the same goal exercise. And that's like a beautiful way to kiss goodbye to what have I learned? What did I say I was going to do that I didn't? What am I grateful for? And then you start also noticing, like, geez, I did a lot. Like, you can beat yourself up, especially on social media. You can think that like you are completely stagnant. And when you start writing that down, you can be like, wait, I like, those were big things for me, and they wouldn't be things I'd post on social media. And then that next reflection of, okay, cool, now going into the new year, what do I want to do? I think that
Mm.
can be a ritual. Journaling in general can be a ritual. I think practicing gratitude with a friend is an amazing thing. They say that gratitude, when you share it, is like much more effective than just writing a list of things. Like if you are grateful to the people around you and you make a point of reaching out to someone, or, following through with really true, real compliments to people, I think karma is a real thing. It comes back in waves. And yeah, I think that would be creating those little rituals. And how do you stop and literally smell the roses and then also give yourself space to persevere?
Mm. Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like sometimes when I've stopped and smelt the roses, I end up like passing out, and then I wake up and it's like winter and like all the roses have died. And
Yeah.
I'm like, 'cause I would like maybe put, when I was doing my photography stuff on Instagram, I would be so
Mhm.
consistent for like 3 or 4 months, posting short form
Mhm.
videos every single day, like obsessing over it. And then
Yeah.
something would change in my life, or I move somewhere or do something. And then
Mhm.
I'd just like get out the habit of it for like 2 or 3 days. And then I'd
Yeah.
blink and it'd been 3 months. I hadn't done anything.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like, it's an over exaggeration, but I'd say I'm like slightly traumatized from that. So like, since I've
Yeah.
started the podcast, I've been really like strict to myself to like not stop and like do a
Yeah.
little thing every day. And my mum said it, and like also my girlfriend, she was like, "You're like either on or off."
Mm.
And
Are you ADHD like me?
well, my dad's ADHD and my sister's ADHD.
Mhm.
I I don't know if I am. Maybe I have definitely have hyperfixation. I'm like very
Yeah.
obsessive.
Yes.
I only like doing things that I really enjoy to the exclusion of
Mhm.
basically everything else.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was actually going to say is I think it's different when you're doing something you love, you
mm,
know? And I think that's where like the idea of alignment comes in. Like you found this thing that you love interviewing, you're building something that's yours. And I think anyone loves that. Like we all want to own our work and like, put a piece of ourselves into what we're doing. At least I think a lot of creative people feel that
yeah,
way. And in that way, sometimes it doesn't feel like work. And
yeah,
it's making you, if after this you're energized, you're like, mom, dad, girlfriend, I just did a great podcast and, I hit this milestone and whatever. And that actually helps you switch off. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I can relate to that very much
Yeah.
so. And I think I can also beat myself up because I think when you post, you can see obviously the exact timeline. So it's like, that was March, that was April, that was November. And now why is there such a big gap between April and November? Like, what the hell was I doing? And I think to your point about seasons, there's definitely some truth in that. Like you can't force the work out of you if it's not there, at least if it's something where it's meaningful and it's coming from your heart or it really aligns with you. I don't think you can force the timing of that. Like if you really feel like I need to switch off, I don't have it in me, that's also a good thing. Like there's a good thing
Mm.
in that pause so that you can, that's actually part of the work if you think about it. Like that pause
Mm.
was part of the work. You learned new things, you came up with new strategies, your subconscious learned a bunch of things and now you're pouring it in when you're back on again. So
Mm.
I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good advice and really true. I wonder if
Mm,
we can create those pauses every
mm,
day though, and every week, because maybe it's almost like it builds up. And
mm,
then if you don't have those pauses every day, it then
mm,
cascades into those weeks and months
for
of
sure.
almost, I guess, burnout or demotivation.
Mm,
And I wonder if there's like a ritual that we could do every single
yeah,
evening or morning where you
yeah.
can just pause and reflect.
Mm,
And
mm,
what would you recommend that to be from your experience?
mm. I think for me, it's taking no phone into the bathroom where I bath and I light candles.
Mm.
Sometimes I'll have music. Sometimes I'll have a podcast with my little speaker. Often not though. And I think like finding ways to almost pamper yourself in those moments so that you feel like you're doing a bit of a ritual. Maybe that's a bit of a girly example. I also like
No,
my
I
boyfriend
enjoy that.
does that. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I think I love buying the different little essential oils and picking different scents and deciding which scent I want. Like, and that I I'm almost never sure now because I love that ritual so much. So I think like find whatever that is for you. Maybe it is like lighting incense in the morning and reading a book because it's not. I don't think it's all about like trying to understand yourself and right. Like sometimes it is escaping a little bit into a good book or escaping a little bit into a good bath. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
giving yourself that space. It's like that famous thing of creatives need to get bored. Like we need boredom to come up
Mm.
with idea because it always comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I had a neuroscientist on. He said like if we're stopping ourselves from being bored, and when we stop ourselves from being bored, we are basically not letting our default mode network or default
Mhm.
network in our brains be stimulated, which is the kind
Yes.
of self-reflection and just daydreaming
Yes.
circuit in our brain. And that's
Yeah.
when we do often come up with these insights. I mean, when I came up with the podcast or decided I was going to finally do it,
Mhm.
I was listening to a podcast, but I kind of zoned out and was walking, and then something just clicked, and I was like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm going to do it.
walking is amazing for that.
Yeah,
Hey. I
yeah,
work in advertising, and a lot of the time when we're stuck with a brief, we like, let's go on a walk. And I can't tell you, that is like the cheat code to and then often you're not going to go and discuss it. You just pumping some blood into your brain, oxygen, everything, and actually letting go. Like letting go of it. You have to know when to actually be like, okay, I'm gonna have a good night's sleep. I'm gonna leave this to my subconscious. I kind of like I did that. I don't know if I should like reveal this right now, but like before going on my trip, I was so desperate to come up with a business idea and start a bit of a side hustle to keep my motivation up outside of work. Because I think something you learn, a lot of people leave varsity and then work becomes everything because you're trying to prove yourself. And eventually it becomes like your identity. And then eventually you're like, I need something else outside of this because it can't be everything. And so, I was like, I made the intention at the end of my trip because I booked a trip to Europe. I went overseas for a month. And I was like, I'm not going to actively look for things, but I'm going to come back with an idea. And I didn't come back with an idea immediately. So I was like, okay, I don't believe in this manifestation stuff anymore. Like, I don't think it works. And then also randomly on a walk, I had put something together that I saw while I was away. And I was like, I'm going to do that. And so
Mm.
I've been, conceptualizing a little business idea on the side, but it was just so funny. Like, I almost laughed at myself because like, that's so anti me. I would be the person to research and like write down things. And I really think there's something in letting it all go and then letting the inspiration come to you when you're feeling it's too much. And I think creating those spaces in the day, even, going outside during my lunch break and sitting in the sun, that like does wonders. And when I don't do that, I really feel it. Like I feel the slug coming in.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And what's the product for the business?
The product, I think that will be a to be continued
Okay.
question.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, okay.
where I've got my Substack is called For the Record. And a couple of people have asked me, like, is there any meaning behind the name? And there is, but it's on its way. So,
Okay, okay. 'Cause it might be on its way by the time this is out as well. So
like, really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in terms of, I guess, extrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivation, from your writing, it seems that you definitely are an advocate for being intrinsically motivated by things rather than being extrinsically. What are the
Yeah.
dangers of being extrinsically motivated by things, and what does that actually look like versus intrinsic motivation?
Mm, I love this question because it kind of links back to values. And if you look at healthy values versus bad values, bad values or unhealthy values are out of your control. So it's like it's not in your control and you can't experience it immediately. And there's almost a superstitiousness to them. So that would be something like popularity, because you can't experience popularity right now in your own self. And you will never get control of it because you're never going to be inside of everyone's heads who you've ever met. So that would just be the first example. Compared to a healthy value, you can experience instantly. So I can choose right now to be loyal. I can choose right now to persevere. I can choose right now to be patient. And I think it's been such a good exercise that I'm such an advocate for all of the like personality tests and like getting to know yourself more. I think because I've seen people in my life, especially older people in my life, who haven't taken the time to get to know themselves. And I think that understanding of yourself and your boundaries and where you're at and your values let you actually then let go of yourself and actually just enjoy being with other people and being interested in other people. And like you become, I think that's what I've noticed as a pattern in the most selfless people is they've definitely done some kind of work. You see this with a lot of the time with artists. I'm not saying all artists, but I met a fashion designer and I met an artist in my childhood. They were much older, my parents' age. And these two women were just, I was so like they were magnetic and they were selfless and they were, I think that maybe my guess now looking back on that and why was I so drawn to these women who had such a great influence and impact on me and inspired me. I think it was like a level of what do I like? What do I want? What do I need? And you have to go through that process if you're going to become an artist and paint something. You have to go through that process when you start a business and create a fashion label. And she's like one of the biggest fashion designers in South Africa now. And so I think I think that's where it lies is if you are only extrinsically motivated and you're only looking for the outside to kind of tell you that everything's okay and to reaffirm, "Oh, okay, I'm fine, I'm on track," which we've all been there and I'm something like I still experience definitely. It's you've got to like almost reprogram yourself. Like, is that a good value? Is that something I should be chasing? I have to do it now with Substack. I'm like, I really need to stop checking that dashboard for all of the views because this is not what I want to get addicted to. There's like this
Mm.
thing of neural pathways in your early 20s. And I'm like, oh my God, I do not want to get myself addicted to the likes or the views or the comments, and keep reminding myself of like, what are the reasons I'm doing this. And I think, yeah, the intrinsic world definitely will then like roll into your extrinsic world, will roll into how you be in the world. So
Mm.
starting from the in out is definitely my philosophy.
Definitely, I 100% agree. And I think if you're just basing your goals and you're striving for things just off of extrinsic motivation, then you're
Mhm.
going to actually be way more likely to quit sooner, because most people who are sane and aren't intrinsically passionate about something will quit when it gets super hard. It's only the people that have the intrinsic motivation
Mhm.
and that deep passion for something
That's
and
so
persistence for
true.
something that they persevere, really. But
Yeah.
do you think it's not a necessarily a bad thing if you have some negative emotion or negative things happen to you, to also
Mhm.
use that as fuel, as motivation, especially at the start when you need a bit more activation energy to do something? Oh yeah, I want to prove that person wrong. I want to prove those bullied wrongs. I'm going to prove my parents wrong. Like, do you think it's important or okay to have that negative fuel as well as that positive fuel as well?
Mhm. I don't know if proving someone wrong is necessarily the right negative emotion to use to fuel you. I think because that's still, once again, it's about that other person. It's not really
Mm,
about you. It's like the
mm,
same thing with learning to forgive your enemies. Like, you, something my dad's always taught me is like, you should actually, he doesn't necessarily pray, but he would say, pray for your enemies, like, wish them well, send
mm,
them love and light. Like, imagine a little light beam going from you to them, because, like, for them to have done that thing, that horrible thing, they obviously must have been in an unhappy place. But when it comes to negative emotions fueling you, 100%. Like, if if you're reaching a rock bottom, it can be an amazing turning point, you know? And I think it's about listening to your emotions actually. So if you are feeling, geez, I feel so lazy, like, use that negative emotion as a kick to do something. Okay, I'm gonna go for a walk. Just something simple and easy I can do. I'm gonna pick a podcast I've been really wanting to listen to, go for a walk. That was triggered. Often it's triggered by a negative emotion.
mm,
So I think my reasoning for starting a Substack, starting a YouTube, which is very early days for me, but it's brought me a lot of joy so far because it's been a creative outlet. It started from hating what I was doing at work, like literally feeling so understimulated, and being someone who loves to find meaning in life and finds real stories, and working in advertising where, sometimes the clients we work on are not necessarily about that. And having to do it anyways was driving me crazy. I was like, everything gets picked apart by a client and boiled down. And eventually you're creating something you don't recognize. Like, you can't believe this is your work. So I needed something else. And that was like, it's like the yin, back to the yin and the yang. You can't just have the good. You've got to have that negative emotion to kick you into
mm.
yeah.
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 Do you think you'll ever become a full-time writer or YouTuber if, you become successful enough to earn money from it?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I really would love to, but I think my initial passion, so similar to you with photography, I also love photography.
Mm,
Thought about buying a camera this Black Friday, but didn't. And I loved videography in particular. Like, I always said I wanted to be a director. That was my top tier number one goal in life for so long. Like, grew up making home videos. My little sister had to be the actress in everything. I was the producer. So I love the idea of like story and storytelling, and then bringing that together with film. And such a big fan of film. But in our country, every career advisor was like, don't do it. It's not worth it in this country. You got to go to America if you want to do that. And so rather go for something more general. And I guess this is my way of coming back to that in my own way and starting to get back into videoing life and documenting life and looking back and finding the stories and things. I think my biggest inspiration at the moment, you should totally check her out, is Life of Rheeder. I don't know if you know her on YouTube, but she she basically changed the game for vlogging. It's like cinematic level stuff. I'm just here with my iPhone for now, but one day, if I could be producing something like that, I'd be very stoked.
Yeah, I bet you will. And why did you listen to the career advisor?
Yeah. I think because I was 17 and my parents were also anti it. And I think there was definitely a lot of truth in it. And I don't regret what I did. I loved my degree. I did information design. So that was 4 years of like probably the happiest years so far in my life of just constant creative freedom and constant learning. Like one week it would be on film, and then the next week it would be on set design, and then the next week it would be on business collateral and logo design. So it was always changing. And I think the like ADHD in me was frothing for that. And I think that's probably what I constantly need to be doing is finding novelty, finding ways to keep evolving and keep learning.
Yeah, and you're 25 now, so you're halfway through your 20s. Why do people feel so lost and confused in their 20s?
Mm. I think this goes back to high school, definitely, and school in general, is you move into every grade all at the same time. You all have your matric dance, which is like the equivalent of prom at the same time. You all pick your subjects at the same time. There's also such clear markers of how to get past into the next grade. Like you've got term one, term two, term three, you've got your report cards. So if you are someone who's an achiever like me, I then entered the workforce and, there's only so many promotions you get in your life. And then what worsened everything for me was Instagram and social media, where you start comparing your timelines. And it's such a weird thing because your whole life has been a timeline, like literally naming every single year. And like you'll experience this soon, I'm sure. You can't believe how quickly a year goes by. And because you don't have those markers, the years like blur together. I can't even tell you the last 3 years for me. I get like the events confused of where things happen. And so you almost have to start redefining your own markers and your own, at least if you're like me and you but OCD like that, you want to like feel like you're experiencing time and not just letting it pass you by, which can easily happen with TikTok or Instagram, and just like time passes so quickly. And so I think it's a combination of that. It's like we learned the wrong values in school. I learned the wrong values in school. I learned to go for all the achievements and the milestones. And for that, I would be happy. And then in adulthood, for me, it's all about self trust. And I never got taught that. I never got taught to follow the things that I truly was drawn to naturally because it brought me joy. Because like you said, you burn out when you're doing something you hate. You're
Yeah.
gonna lose steam. And if you don't burn out at your job, you'll burn out in other ways. Like you won't feel like you have time for your relationships. So I think that's why maybe a lot of us are struggling is now you're comparing your timelines to everyone else because that's what we always did. And you have to actually almost shed the timeline and realize that's not even a thing anymore. And everyone's going to have a different timeline to you. And you're going to have to trust that when you look back, it all makes sense as long as you're
Mm,
following the things that are true to you. Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. And what are the key things about life that school didn't actually like teach you,
Mhm.
and how did you learn them in your own life, I guess, after school?
I think this, don't want to be too repetitive, but this is like going back to values. So, we never sat down and learned about how to be a good human being. Like we never sat down and
Yeah.
learned about how to not burn out. We never, like all the real human things that you experience as an adult in this life. And like so many things, like public speaking was never as big of a thing in school, at least for us, as maybe it should have been. Or yeah, like boundaries, how to set boundaries with yourself, like journaling. I'm like, there's so many things. If I had to go back and change school based on the things that have actually taught me things that have really helped me in the real world, it would be such a different ball game.
Do you think they do that on purpose though? Because there's been enough,
Mm,
like there's been decades worth of work on these
mm,
self-improvement tactics like you were just describing, like journaling, even
mm,
meditation,
mm,
and learning how to start your own business and do public speaking.
mm,
I think
mm,
this education system has had enough time to change. Do you think it's not actually
mm,
trying to make us become our ideal selves, but more maybe make us conform more and
mm,
fit in more and not
mm,
be our ideal selves? Do you think
mm.
that's actually the underlying incentive of school?
Yeah, I think this definitely isn't my expertise at all, but from what I've gathered, also from hearing conversations on this, is school was set up for like the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's actually wild that it hasn't changed all that much since. Like there've been videos on this where they compare like what it was like 100 years ago to now, and the things that still exist. So I think it was set up to make you a worker. And
Yeah.
very interestingly, someone actually spoke about this on YouTube where The Simpsons would never have made it as the biggest show of the 90s if it was produced today. Why? Because the main guy, Homer, and I don't even watch The Simpsons, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like he was the average dude. He was living in a big house. He had a wife. He had 3 kids, I think. He had a
Yeah.
normal job, and he appealed to the everyday man. And that's just not how the world works today. Like you're starting to see people are working 3 jobs because they've got this freelance thing and this AI thing. And so it's like the world has changed so much, and the school system has not set us up for that. And I don't think they even know how, because it is, especially with AI now, things are changing so drastically. But
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. It's like, what would it have been like if kids had gone to entrepreneurial school? Or I always think, imagine we had a year to just do 2 weeks in every kind of like big industry and get a feel for
Mm.
that. Like it's chalk and cheese when you see what we learn in school versus how things work out there in the real world.
Yeah, it kind of just seems like conditioning and trying to make
Mm,
you that office factory
mm,
worker where you have no side hustles or you have no creativity.
yeah.
And is that a reason why when you have joined the working world since leaving university, you did say you feel less motivated at points and you've had to almost start the YouTube channel and the Substack to counteract that? Is that a reason for
Yeah,
it?
definitely. It's like you're working towards someone else's dream when you're working corporate. It's not like you, yeah, it's like, oh my God, can my boss please not discover this video? You're not working towards how you would do things, or your vision. And I think everyone has a vision and everyone has something unique to give. And definitely being in a creative degree and then expecting so much of how amazing this first job could be. It's the same job I've been in for 3 years now. And there have been some amazing projects, but they're few and far between compared to the everyday usual stuff that comes in. And so I kept hearing it from like my mentors. They would be like, you need to just start a side hustle. You need to just start anything that's going to be your creative outlet. And I did start noticing like all the creative directors in our company who are, a couple levels. This one has a t-shirt brand. This one he paints on the weekends and sells his art. And I was like, maybe I do need to start something or other like this where you do have creative control, where you feel like you're putting your vision out there. I'm sure you feel a little bit like that with your podcast, right?
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Mm.
my biggest fear is that, though. My biggest fear is looking back at my life and just like working an office job the entire time and not doing
Yes.
the podcast and not trying to go pro with it. Like
Yeah.
really not giving myself and doubting myself and having the limiting beliefs like we were talking about earlier, where
Mhm.
you didn't try and write and start the Substack, or you didn't try and start that business, or you
Yeah.
didn't try and start the YouTube channel, or I didn't try and start the podcast, is because
Mhm.
yeah, we're in our 20s. We don't. You're still living at home, and I'm still living at home once I'm out of university.
Yeah.
We don't have any kids. We don't really have that many bills.
Mm.
Why would we not try and build something now when it's easiest,
Exactly.
and it's never been better or easier to do it, and there's never been as much potential to do it?
For
Because for me
sure.
personally, the biggest motivation for me is having freedom, which is being in complete control of my time. And for me, that
Yes.
means making a living doing something I love. So
Yes.
the dream for me is making a living from this, from podcasting, and I'm not
Yes.
going to stop, you know, regardless of what happens or how long it takes, because I
Yeah.
just, I am very scared. The motivation is a lot of fear, and of obviously a lot of passion and love
Mhm.
for it as well. But there is that fear driving me as well, which is like, I've never wanted to, like when I was 5 years, I said it in the last podcast, when I was 5 years old, like I used to have that dread, when it was like, oh, you probably didn't get this because you loved school. I read I read your Substack post. I was going to say, do you remember on
Oh my God.
Sundays
You're so
when it was the
research.
weekend? On Sundays, it was the weekend, and I would
Yeah.
realize it was Sunday evening, and I'd get this pit in my
Mhm.
stomach, this dread that I had to go back to school. And I
Mhm.
also used to get that when I thought of like working in the real world. So yeah, it's
Yes.
just
Yeah.
very
Even
interesting.
though I
But
had that in school, I completely relate to that. Like, especially now doing something where I do get the Sunday scaries without a doubt. Like, I have to watch a movie on Sunday night and it has to be like so lighthearted, feel good because I'm like, I genuinely get the Sunday scaries. So it's a real thing. And I think, yeah, again, going back to that fear is great when it comes to pushing you towards something you
Mm,
love. I think it's also interesting that it's all changed so quickly in terms of how you can actually make a career like this and the value. It's hard to see the value in it because it's kind of exponential. Like a lot of the time,
yes.
creators like they put out stuff for years and then they get that one
Yep.
moment and the hockey stick for them. But another thing that's tough is our parents weren't living in that world
Yeah.
because it's all changed so quickly. They have their doubts, and it's hard to
Yep.
not feel a bit of that doubt. So well done for doing what you're doing. And like, it's really impressive that you've started so young because I don't know if I would have, I've started a YouTube at age 24. I wanted to start it. I had written a script for 21 things I learned at 21 years old for my
Mm,
first YouTube video. And I couldn't do it. I was like,
mm.
this is too cringe. Everyone's going to make fun of me. So you're wise beyond your years for starting because all of those things are not true. And I think the interesting thing is like the worst thing that could happen of us putting ourselves out there, if it doesn't work out and you don't hit the views that you want to hit and make the passive income you want to make, the like almost it's the wrong term for it, like the collateral damage, but in the positive way, like the connections that you would have made along the way,
Mm,
you never know where that leads.
yeah.
And so putting yourself out there, even in corporate, to be honest with you, like raising your hand for the things that you're not ready for is where all the opportunities come. It's not when you're ready and someone notices you. It's when you're not ready, you put yourself out there despite of that. Someone sees something in you and goes, okay, I can see, I want to invest in this person. They have potential. That's where like the opportunities land on your lap. And it's not landing on your lap because you worked hard towards it. So yeah, well done.
Mm. No, no, I appreciate it. And, you didn't start at 21, but you, one, had the idea, and two, started 3 years later, and you're
Mm,
still young enough for it to succeed, and it's doing well now. You could,
mm,
you could still be 25 and thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to start the YouTube. I started it in a month's time, and
yeah,
you never end up doing it. So, you
yeah.
should give yourself a pat on the back as well.